all the world's marvelous creatures, nothing is larger or more captivating, or kills more spectacularly. Perhaps nothing else lives to such old age, harbors such mysteries, or touches us in quite the same way.
It's so beautiful. And if you're closer to them, it hits you spiritually and emotionally.
Once you make eye contact with them, you cannot forget that experience. You can't walk away from animals that have that kind of magnetism and attraction.
After hunting them for generations, we brought their widespread slaughter to an end. But the battle to save them goes on, and around the world, a new breed of champion fights for the whales.
Just about everything tried to get out of the water. And our study population was decimated in front of our eyes.
In the Pacific Northwest, a scientist wonders whether sonar is injuring killer whales and finds himself at odds with the U.S. Navy.
The Navy needs sonar to detect underwater submarines. If you can't see a submarine coming, you can't protect American cities against a submarine coming close to shore.
Easy, baby, easy.
While in Florida, an army of volunteers confronts the terrible mystery of strandings, racing against time and the elements to save a group of whales and its orphaned calf. In the chill waters of the Arctic, scientists risk life and limb to study the utterly mysterious Bowhead whale. And in the South Pacific, the son of a whaler fights to protect a humpback's paradise. A new chapter is being written in the ancient text of whales and humans, as a new generation pushes back the frontiers of knowledge to save these enchanting and fantastic beings. Puget Sound in Washington State, a place of serene beauty, and now the unlikely epicenter of a scientific battle. Here, marine biologist Ken Balcom has been observing the region's killer whales, or orcas, for nearly 3 decades. Perhaps the longest continuous study of these grand creatures.
The older animals I've known for much of their life, the younger ones for all of their life. They're simply magnificent. There's K40. Female has been here ever since the study began. There's K21, a young male born since we began.
Ken's work never stops. Perched above Puget Sound, his front porch serves as a spectacular vantage point from which to observe the 80-some orcas in his study group as they swim by.
J27, L22.
Years ago, Ken was among a handful of scientists who revolutionized the study of whales by implementing photo identification techniques.
They seem to be waiting.
Today, he and his volunteers photograph and videotape the whales' movements, while an underwater microphone records their distinctive calls.
We have a hydrophone out by the north of the reef out there, and then we just pipe it in through the speakers, and now we can record it on the video.
Every day here is pretty much the same. It's wake up in the morning and look for whales.
Every day, that is, except May 5th, 2003, A day that would change his life and spark a personal crusade to protect a pod of whales he considers family. It is a family he has come to know through thousands of hours of videotape and some 100,000 photographs taken over the course of nearly 30 years.
So this is that frame right there?
Yeah, it's that frame right there. And
When we started out this study, we just had a whole bunch of photographs of dorsal fins and saddle patterns. We had a lot of whales. We didn't know the relationship of any of them. But as we continued the study, we came over here in time, and we could track the genealogy. As a mother had a baby, we could see its relationship with the mother. She maybe had sisters and brothers that traveled with the baby, and the baby may have had a baby itself, another generation.
Ken documented that his whales live in 3 separate pods. And like human families, these whales often stay together for life, forming extended groups. Each of Ken's pods is led by the oldest females. One of J Pod's leaders is Granny, who may be more than 90 years old.
They're part of the family. That's the way I feel about these whales. They're not pets, but they're part of the family. Or maybe I'm part of their family.
Each fall, Ken says goodbye to the whales as they head out to the open sea, perhaps following the salmon. In the spring, when the fish return to spawn, the whales reappear. But lately, too many of the whales have gone missing, whales that should be thriving.
We see all these little tombstones, and any of these whales that die in their youth or in their prime years are likely to have died from some suspicious cause. It's just not normal to have such a massive investment of a mother into an offspring who's a top predator in this whole ecosystem and just have them die young.
What could be happening to the whales? Ken knew that pollutants and declining salmon stocks were taking their toll, but he suspected something else was at work as well.
See who that is out by that little boat?
Then came the shock of May 5th, 2003, in an eruption of sound.
Our local J-pod, southern resident whales, came right in front of the house, along with the destroyer hanging with its sonar. It was a remarkable sort of laboratory kind of experiment that I couldn't have designed in advance.
Within minutes, Ken observed Dahl's porpoises racing from the area. Then a group of killer whales headed toward shore, as if they intended to strand. Ken could see they were members of J-Pod, Granny's clan.
I try not to get angry about things, but this just sort of welled up from my stomach to my throat, and I just wanted to shout. This was occurring in a known marine mammal habitat where we know these whales are already endangered.
A former Navy officer himself, Ken was acutely aware that the lives of thousands of men and women depend on sonar every day. But he also knew from first-hand experience that sonar can be harmful to some whales. Ken desperately tried to get word to the ship, as did others who were near the strait that day. About 4 hours after the exercise began, the message got through and the Navy turned its sonar off. But Ken remained concerned about the long-term consequences.
I'll be back here pretty quick.
He would watch the whales carefully for the next few weeks, monitoring them for any change in their behavior.
And J2 showed up from the north, and then they all kind of broke up.
In the Florida Keys, a different kind of crisis unfolds. More than 24 whales have stranded in shallow water. They are pilot whales, among the most social of their kind, and the most notorious for this baffling and apparently suicidal behavior. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is on the scene, directing scores of volunteers. NOAA marine biologist Laura Engelby is in charge, looking for clues to why this happened.
I can see a lot of them. One real popular theory is that there might be a lead animal or one of the members of the group that's sick and ends up closer to shore. Since pilot whales are very cohesive, very gregarious, they're very tight-knit groups, they end up following that one individual animal. They get in shallow water, they become disoriented, the tide goes out and they're left stranded on the flats like we saw when we got here.
The whales are so weak, the volunteers have to hold them up to keep them from drowning. They are suffering from severe dehydration and sunburn. For some, it is too late.
We had a marine mammal veterinarian come on scene, and those animals that looked like they were just suffering, we just felt like the most humane course of action was to euthanize some of them, so we had to do that.
The 7 remaining whales will require special care day and night from a small army of volunteers. Members of 2 local rescue groups, the Marine Mammal Conservancy and the Florida Keys Marine Mammal Rescue Team, are in the vanguard. Local residents go absent from work to help, and vacationers abandon their holiday plans. It takes more than 100 a day in 4-hour shifts to keep the whales afloat.
That's good.
There's a connection and a fascination. Once you make eye contact with them and they've made eye contact with you, you cannot and you will not forget that experience.
The Marine Mammal Conservancy's Rick Trout has worked to save stranded animals for more than 20 years.
This animal's name is number 1.
Each animal is identified, but not by name.
I've never been fond of naming these creatures because I have the personal opinion that their mother already named them. In the beginning, we numbered them by size. The big guy was 1, down to the baby who was 7.
Perhaps no more than 1 year old, little number 7 may have seen its mother die.
We've got an orphan here, whose mother obviously is not here. He has taken up with number 6 and number 2, an adult female. And thankfully, it's the coming together of a new pod seems to be happening. The challenge is keeping everybody alive so that we can see that new pod go back to the ocean where they belong.
Keeping all the whales alive will take a marathon effort, but the calf presents some special challenges.
We've got a few little teeth, and maybe we can open up here and see if we want to. You're still cutting teeth. See if there's just little nubs that have come out, and she's sticking her tongue out at you. Thank you very much. Not quite ready to catch fish.
The orphan has a lot of growing up to do. It must bond with the other whales or face a life in captivity. In the view of many here, a fate worse than death.
That was good. That was good.
Why whales strand themselves is one of the most bewildering mysteries surrounding these great creatures. But it is hardly the only one. For all the communion we may feel with whales and dolphins, we know shockingly little about them. Far from the shores of sunny Florida, amid fantastic seascapes of water and ice, another kind of whale is just beginning to give up its secrets. This is the Arctic's great bowhead whale. Once a coveted prize for European whalers, it was driven to the edge of extinction. Today they are on the rebound, but remain threatened. Perhaps 350 of these grand and mysterious leviathans frequent the waters off western Greenland. Now, Danish scientist Mads Peter Heide Jorgensen has launched a groundbreaking study of these whales.
I actually think maybe there's two. It's only in recent years that we are being able to find enough bowheads to do meaningful studies on them. The fact that we know so little about them gives an enormous challenge to try to figure out where they go, what they do, how they do it.
Mads Peter has chosen a grueling line of work. Whales are among the hardest of all animals to study. And the Arctic is an utterly unforgiving environment in which to work. Mads Peter and his team are here to put satellite tags on the whales. Only then can they hope to chart the bowhead's travels through the Arctic. It's brutal, bone-chilling work, but exhilarating.
Every time I get a close encounter with a bowhead whale, you know, the heart beats a little faster. You see it at a distance and you drive up to it, but when you get there, it's so much larger than what you thought, and it's always scary to be very close to them.
Bowheads are among the largest of the whales, weighing up to 60 tons or more.
I think it's a little bit bumpy right now.
They may be big targets, but tagging them can be dangerous work. There's no way to predict how the giant creatures will react to being pursued. The Arctic Ocean is an alien world for humans, but for the bowhead whale, this is home. At this time of year, food is everywhere. Millions of tiny shrimp-like copepods, each a rich bundle of fat. The bowhead is well equipped to harvest them, opening its enormous mouth that strains copepods by the ton. The whales feed here for just 3 weeks and then head off to parts unknown. To find out where, Mads Peter and his team will play out an ancient harpooning epic in miniature, but for the good of the whales. A near miss, but the team is not easily deterred. And so much hangs in the balance.
We should study them not just because we love them, but also because they are important parts of the ecosystem and they have important stories to tell back to us.
Line up! Wait! Go up and coming up again! Stop! Yes! It went in all the way.
The enigmatic bowhead sets off on its chilly course, taking us along via satellite. Knowing where it will go is a crucial step in the battle to protect its waters and ensure the future of its kind. In Puget Sound, Washington, Ken Balcom pored over images from the naval sonar exercise of May 5th, 2003.
I just wonder what it's like for these whales. We're seeing responses that suggest there's some of them trying to get their head out of the water. They're unsure of which direction to swim. Just how much hearing damage do they suffer as a result of this? And how important is it to their survival if they've lost hearing in this frequency range?
Exactly how sonar might affect marine mammals like whales and porpoises has long been a matter of controversy. But Ken knew that sonar can harm at least one kind of whale. Eerily enough, the evidence also arrived on his doorstep, but in a different place more than 3 years earlier. The Bahama Islands, March 2000. Ken had been studying a group of little-known beaked whales for almost a decade. One morning, the unthinkable happened. One of his whales came ashore.
The most extraordinary part was that it swam in right in front of the house that we were staying in. It could have been a mile away and we'd never heard about it. As we were pushing the first whale out, neighbors reported another whale about a mile away. So we went down and kept it wet. And while we were doing that, other neighbors reported another whale.
"17 animals stranded that day, including 1 dolphin, 2 minke whales, and 14 beaked whales, 6 of which died. Ken took to the air to look for more whales and whatever might be driving them out of the water. He sighted more strandings. Then he spotted a U.S. Navy destroyer. Ken later confirmed that the destroyer was part of a Navy battle group engaged in a sonar exercise.
Just about everything within 50 miles of that exercise tried to get out of the water. All these creatures that we'd spent 10 years studying were dying. I was devastated by this whole event because, first of all, we were very attached to these animals. We came to know them, and our study population was being decimated in front of our eyes.
But Ken needed proof. At the urging of a colleague in the Office of Naval Research, he collected the heads of 2 beaked whales. They were flown to Harvard Medical School and CT scanned. The results were striking. Both whales had hemorrhaging around their brains and ears. It was some of the first evidence suggesting that sonar can harm whales. It is still unclear what actually caused the hemorrhaging. Was it the sonar itself, or injuries sustained when the whales came ashore? Either way, scientists believe that sonar disturbed the animals, possibly panicking some and causing them to strand.
The Bahama Stranding was a key incident in this whole issue because it was the first time that we saw sonar and a marine mammal stranding at the same time, and we also got fresh tissues from the animals that had been killed so that we could examine them. The report that I helped edit concluded that it was highly likely that the sonar did cause these animals to strand and die.
The Navy agreed that sonar likely played a key role in the strandings and has taken steps to assure that it doesn't happen again.
Just within the last 6 months, we've delivered a map of beaked whale hotspots of the world. So everybody in the Navy now knows what they didn't know 12 months ago.
Dr. Robert Gissner oversees the Navy's multi-million-dollar effort to study the impact of human-generated noise underwater. The eventual goal? To find a way to train its people under realistic battle conditions without harming marine mammals.
We're discovering that sonar has some adverse effects on marine mammals that we're very concerned about. And we're investigating the whys and wherefores of how this is happening. Because we're pretty much babes in the woods when it comes to understanding how sound works in the ocean.
Why would sonar drive creatures like whales to strand? They are profoundly acoustic creatures, relying on sound to communicate. Many, like the killer whale, also use a natural form of sonar to navigate and to hunt, sending out sounds and reading what bounces back from their prey. Might this make them vulnerable to the vast amount of noise churned up by humans, including sonar? Sonar is used by many commercial ships, freighters, fishing vessels, and ocean liners. But some kinds of military sonar can be especially powerful, comparable underwater to the thunder of a jet engine at takeoff. Still, no one really knows how this volume of sound is perceived by whales. And while the Navy admits its sonar almost certainly caused the beaked whales to strand, it has no evidence that killer whales are similarly affected.
We don't have any indication that they're particularly bothered by sonars. This footage that Ken provided is really the first information I think any of us in the marine mammal community have had that killer whales might react to sonars in any way.
The stakes for the Navy and perhaps for all of us are enormous.
I think of 5,000 people sitting ducks on an aircraft carrier. They would be blind without sonar.
If they can't see submarines approaching, then their own warships are in danger, or American cities might be in danger from attack by submarine.
Now, countries around the world have begun deploying new super-silent submarines, vessels that may be impossible to detect without powerful sonar. What will this mean for orcas and other marine mammals? In his Watching post on Puget Sound, Ken Balcom is convinced the consequences could be devastating. But for now, the evidence eludes him. In Florida, the fight to save the pilot whales goes on. It is one of the most ambitious attempts to rehabilitate and release stranded whales ever undertaken.
So this is number 7.
This is the baby. Looking for mommy and looking for something to eat, or companion.
5 days after stranding, the survivors have reached an important milestone.
You want to roll them already?
Thanks to round-the-clock care, the whales are in stable condition and regaining their strength. This is lifting human spirits and making whales cantankerous.
They're fighting. Pick her up. Are you in here, please? Pick her up, Pam. Number 1 swam by and bit number 2's tail.
The ring has become too confining, dangerous for the whales and the volunteers.
Some of the same things you've been doing in here.
Rick decides to bring the pilots into open water and give them a chance to move under their own power.
Next breath, everybody hands off for 5 seconds. If anybody bolts, holler.
A group of college students helps whale number 5, who seems to be going downhill.
Number 5, we heard, was doing the worst out of all the whales. In the first 3 hours, the whale was, not really responsive.
Everything goes smoothly. Then whale number 5 surprises everyone.
She started flipping, doing her own roll, and just shot off. We tried to go after her and grab her, and she just shot off.
Number 5 is now in open water, weak and alone, with virtually no chance of survival on its own.
Get one boat over here just to make sure they don't need it.
Within minutes, 2 airplanes and a helicopter have joined the search.
thought it was going to be a miracle to get her back to health before now, and it's truly going to be a miracle if she survive all this.
The helicopter is located a wreck.
After searching frantically, they finally spot the whale. Number 5 has stranded once again. By the time they get there, the whale is no longer breathing, and hearts break.
She didn't make it. We didn't lose her, but we lost her.
But the whales are not the only force of nature confronting the volunteers. A tropical storm is pounding Big Pine Key. The team struggles to maintain its routine and keep the whales from drowning. No one knows how much the whales can take.
There's so many stressors that are working on them here. You know, they just went through a loss of 75% of their family. They're in a captive situation. There are accidents that can happen no matter what you do to plan.
This tiny exposed location is too dangerous for the whales and their keepers. The team makes a desperate decision. They will have to relocate the whales. A risky undertaking for whales and humans. In the vast expanse of the South Pacific Ocean lies another battleground in the struggle for whales. A tropical island paradise known as Tonga. For centuries, tens of thousands of humpback whales made an annual migration to these waters, their mating and nursing grounds. Hunters decimated this population, taking some 200,000 whales for their meat and oil-rich blubber. But in 1978, whaling was banned here, and the whales began to make a slow recovery.
My father used to stand in front of the boat sighting the whales to kill them. And today I'm standing in front of the boat sighting the whales for the people to go and see.
Felipe Tonga was not destined to follow in his father's footsteps.
That sounds more like the female.
Instead, he became a conservationist with the International Fund for Animal Welfare. To Felipe, the humpbacks are sacred.
It's so beautiful. And if you're closer to them, or if they happen to be down below you underwater, the vibration just drives right through your body. It hits you spiritually and emotionally. You just, wow, you know, there was something else. You can't really explain it.
Now Felipe has an urgent mission: to save the whales from a return to the hunt. Tonga is a poor nation where the per capita income is about $5 a day. And the welfare of whales seems far removed from a hand-to-mouth existence. Some Tongans want to resume traditional whaling on a limited basis, taking some 24 animals a year. Felipe has launched a one-man crusade to stop the plan. He goes from village to village to speak for the whales.
The whales are worth far more alive than dead. I was trying to explain to them how the whales actually help us with bringing in the tourists. I feel that it's so important for me to try to get the Tongan people understand what we have in our own backyard is something very unique.
name's Priscilla and I'm your whale watch guide today.
Tourism is a main source of hard currency here, and the whales are quickly becoming the star attraction. This is one of the few places in the world where people are allowed to swim with an endangered species. Felipe does not condone swimming with whales. Although the whales seem free to come and go as they please, he fears for the mothers and calves. Since a calf must surface every few minutes to breathe, and its mother usually will not leave the young one's side, these appealing pairs are the most accessible whales and the most vulnerable to disruption. But as a realist, Felipe knows that snorkels are preferable to harpoons. But the prospect of resumed whaling still looms, and Felipe thinks that even the loss of 24 whales, particularly mothers, could be catastrophic. For the son of a whaling family, the battle to save Tonga's humpbacks is not yet won.
I strongly believe that the whales are part of our culture. I want to see that what I'm trying to save will benefit the future generation to come.
In the Florida Keys, it's moving day for the pilot whales and their human entourage. The entire critical care unit must be shipped across town.
We've got to get everything in place before we move animals, and we have to move animals safely, and all the other things that happen today are just critical to that end. We got 2 animals that'll be on stretchers just like this. These are 2 companion animals that need to be side by side.
With no room for error, every move is practiced on humans before it is attempted with the whales.
Slow and easy. We don't have good footing.
An abandoned boat basin about 3 miles away will become the whale's new recovery ward. With deep water and protection from the weather, it may be a perfect haven.
The longer we keep these guys in the water, the better.
The goal is to move the whales as quickly as possible. Because their skeletons are not designed to support their massive bodies out of water, speed is essential.
This way.
Even a small calf like number 7 might not hold up under the stress.
Easy. Easy, baby. Easy.
And if the convoy is delayed, the animals could go into shock or die. The team is especially worried about whale number 1.
Here we go. Big breath. 1, 2, 3.
At about 1,200 pounds, he faces the greatest medical risk.
Come on, baby, breathe.
Finally, the whales are safe in their new home. And the calf has held up surprisingly well. But as they feared, the move has taken a physical toll on number 1.
Catching up with everybody right now.
Okay.
Number 1's getting his.
So we have to have him in by 10.
3 days after the move, the big male loses his battle and draws his last breath. After just 3 weeks, the group that numbered 7 whales is down to 5. All of them stressed by the move. The goal of releasing them now seems like a distant dream. In Seattle, it's been months since Ken Balcom witnessed the sonar exercise in Puget Sound. To his relief, none of the killer whales actually stranded during or after the May 5th event, and J-Pod seems to be okay. But 9 porpoises washed up in the inland waters of Washington state in the weeks after the exercise, a higher than average number. The U.S. government launched an investigation into the deaths. The scientists discovered that some of the animals died from natural causes, and they found no evidence of harm from sonar in any of the stranded porpoises. But according to their report, some of the animals were too decomposed to yield definitive results. And even in those that could be studied, the scientists could not rule out underwater sound as a contributing factor.
Here you go. There you go, 2 of them.
Fueled by uncertainty, the debate over sonar has become contentious, pitting navies against environmental activists around the world. Some argue that sonar is a relatively small problem, that toxins, fishing nets, and habitat degradation are the real killers. But the issue of sonar is not likely to disappear until its effects are truly understood. In the meantime, the Navy must, by law, avoid harassing whales, a task that will be easier when science provides more answers.
I think that the next year or so will bring tremendous progress in understanding what's going on and developing methods that will enable the Navy to do its job and also enable us to protect the environment.
The Navy is now anticipating warfare close to our shores instead of on the deep ocean. And so their exercises tend to be in shallower water where most of the marine mammal populations are. So we're seeing more interactions between sonar and marine mammals now than we used to see. But certainly they can coexist. And we can cut down the number of deaths that we're seeing by carefully avoiding areas where we know marine mammals concentrate.
One of those areas is Puget Sound, Ken Balcom's doorstep.
I definitely understand Ken's viewpoints on sonar. Twice now he's had a major study site of his interrupted by sonar. And I think that if I were him, I would probably be encouraging the Navy to work elsewhere as well.
In February 2004, the Navy said it would avoid using sonar in Puget Sound when orcas are present. A small sign of hope for Ken and perhaps for the whales.
Okay, come on in. Everybody kiss number 3.
In Florida, the big day has arrived. The pilot whales are now well enough to be released. NOAA has decided to release little number 7. If all goes well, it may be the youngest pilot whale ever returned to the wild.
Making a decision whether or not to release him was agonizing. No one's certain if he'll be able to find food on his own. But we're really hoping that we're putting him in a situation where he can learn from these other whales how to feed himself.
Over the past 2 months, number 7 has bonded with 3 other whales and is especially close to the oldest, number 2. The young whale is also eating fish, even live fish. But of all the whales, the youngster will face the greatest risks when it is returned to the ocean, especially if it gets separated from the group.
The lone pilot whale doesn't have a very good chance at survival. We're going to be monitoring him very closely using its satellite tag, and if we see that he's having any problems out there, we're going to be there to recover him if necessary. The
biggest challenge is preserving the new pod's essential bonds. Number 7 and the whales he is closest to will ride together on this barge, which has been specially modified to support them. For Rick, this is a bittersweet moment.
Everybody's as excited as can be and preparing for the other part of this, which is the sadness of seeing some friends go away once and for all.
With volunteers, scientists, veterinarians, and the press, the flotilla numbers more than a dozen vessels, bound for the release point some 14 miles out to sea. The plan is to release all the whales at one time. Everything depends on whale number 2, the likely pod leader. She's the glue that holds the group together. Just a few miles from their destination, whale number 6 stops breathing. If she dies, the group will be smaller and more vulnerable as it swims to freedom. To reduce the stress on the whale, they submerge one end of the barge. And the waters of the Atlantic Ocean flood in. For long moments, the volunteers hold their breath. Then whale number 6 finally takes one of her own. When the boats reach their destination, a quiet sense of jubilation descends on the volunteers. In the long history of strandings, a unique moment is at hand. The simultaneous release of 5 pilot whales. For the first time in 114 days, the pilot whales feel the warm waters of the Gulf Stream. They are home. Whales 2, 4, and 6 move out together. Nearby, the youngster of the group is swimming not far from whale number 3.
We're happy. We're relieved.
Do it again.
So happy. So happy. It's incredible, and just can't wait to hear how they're doing out there.
Today it went flawlessly. The tracking devices will tell us in a couple weeks just how really well we did, and that's where the report card comes in.
Far to the north, the great Bowhead whales are on the move. Their satellite tags continue to work, showing that these behemoths travel greater distances than anyone knew. And scientists recently learned that bowheads may live as long as 200 years, making them perhaps the oldest creatures on the planet. Some of these great whales may have been calves in Thomas Jefferson's time. In Florida, the lessons learned during the long struggle to keep the whales alive may save many more lives in future strandings. But for whale rehabilitators, there are always good days and bad. Just days after its release, pilot whale number 7, the youngster, separated from the group. Before it could be rescued, it disappeared. Its tag was discovered a week later, bearing evidence of a shark attack. Still, one of the largest releases in U.S. history is a breakthrough in the annals of stranding. 4 of the 5 whales survived. 3 are apparently still together, forming the foundation of a new pod.
You see that those who came up when they take a dive?
Only now are we beginning to learn the story of the largest animals on Earth. And as each chapter unfolds, it is clear that we will play a role in how the story ends.